is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Limited Resources. This is episode number 464. My name is Marshall. I'm one of your Limited Resources. I am in Seattle. It's 10:51 p.m. That means it's pretty late in Denver. Luis, you still up, buddy? You got a cup of coffee over there? Or how you hanging?
I am good. I actually have a sparkling water, much in the vein of my sign-off from last week.
A Spindrift? We might
This
need
is
to start
actually
charging
called
them.
Waterloo. It's the Whole Foods brand, but it's not bad. A little black cherry action.
By the way, we have a Spindrift question in there, a little foreshadowing for our Q&A show. We're going to be answering your questions. These are some of our favorite episodes on the show because we get a variety of topics to tackle as sort of mini subtopics, and we've got a ton of them. So let's get right into business here. First things first, though, channelfireball.com. That's right, the place to go for all things magic related. They stand by their product. They get it shipped out to you quickly, and they are one of the best websites on the internet for anything that you might need. If you need to buy a box, you can do it there. If you need to buy singles or packs or supplies or anything for your magic collection, you're going to find it at channelfireball.com. And we highly recommend checking them out for that reason. But the other reason, free content. Right on the front site, right on the front of the site, you're going to find videos by Reed Duke, Luis Scott-Vargas, Paulo Vitor Damarosa writing articles. The list goes on, and it's some of the best players in the world giving you, well, a lot of the tools that you need to improve. We know that's why you're here. You can find more of it at channelfireball.com. If you want to support the show directly, thank you, by the way, if you do that. It means a lot to us. Patreon.com/limited resources. And you get access to the question of the week. In completely unrelated news, I have a giveaway. This one is for a playmat of, what is it? What is the boat called again?
The Sky Sovereign console flagship.
Yeah, it was from Grand Prix Providence, it says on it. And this one's going to go to Paul Barrett from Mississippi. Thank you, Paul. I'll get this one. I've got kind of a pile of mats to ship out. I'm going to kind of try to do them in chunks. But anyway, Paul, thank you very much for your support of the show. And I'll be sending that out. Next thing, rack it back. We're not going to do a Patreon question of the week because, well, the whole show is
that's pretty much the whole thing.
Yeah, that's the whole thing. All right. First thing, Ribbit, Leapfrog.
Leapfrog is good in the aggro Izzet deck and pretty mediocre everywhere else. So not a card I want to hang my hat on first pick.
Right. Goblin Locksmith, worse than that.
Oh, yeah.
Well, this card's really been a disappointment. Ladev Guardian, the 3 and a white 2/4 with Convoke. Just, ugh.
Yeah, I have been pretty unimpressed by this. I think it's maybe good against like exactly Boros, but for the most part, I think it's not great.
Well, you know what it's really good against? Wary Okapi.
Yes, well, that card's also quite bad.
Yes.
Every card tends to be good against it. So
that's right.
So far, we're basically on bricks.
We're on bricks. Veiled Shade sees a little more play than I thought it would, but it's still not great.
Yeah, it's a nice backup plan. The thing is, Veiled Shade and Dowser of Lights occupy a lot of the same space, and I'd rather just have the Dowser. They're kind of your, 5th to 10th pick black finishers of sorts. So yep. I'm not really that eager to pick them up.
Same. Veiled Shade also suffering greatly from, if left unprotected, dying to direct current and basically always dying to dead weight. Erstwhile Trooper, 1 green, black, 2/2. You can discard a creature to give it +2/+2 and trample. Boy, this card's been bad.
Yeah,
just terrible. Bad. Yeah, it turns out discarding the spells out of your hand for a mediocre onboard effect, not really where you want to be. Wow, this pack, by the way. Maniacal Rage. That's kind of what I'm starting to feel here. Hired Poisoner. It's playable.
Yeah, Hired Poisoner is a fine card, especially good in like Golgari just because it's a removal spell that, fuels your undergrowth.
Yeah, or you can pump up your Erstwhile Trooper. Blade Instructor. There we go.
Sure. I would be mediocre on board for taking a Blade Instructor here, though I wouldn't be happy about it.
Well, by the way, this is our last common Sonic Assault.
Oh, okay. Yes, I would take Sonic Assault here.
Me too.
It's just such a good part of the aggro Izzet deck, and even the control Izzet deck can still utilize it.
Yeah, it's just good enough for the control one, and very good in the aggro one. All right, well, this card goes in that deck too. Electrostatic Field, the 0/4 for 1 and a red with Defender, and whenever you cast it as their sorcery, it pings them.
I like Electrostatic Field. It's not Thermal Alchemist from Eldritch Moon, but it's still pretty good. I think I would take Sonic Assault over it though. But it's pretty close.
It's close. Okay, well, I'm going to one-up you here because apparently our Izzet deck is coming together. Beacon Bolt.
Oh, yeah, I like Beacon Bolt. This is the 1 blue-red sorcery deals 1 to a creature for every spell in your graveyard, and it has Jumpstart. this is really good. It's good in aggro or control Izzet deck, and it's just a big payoff for having like 10-ish spells in your deck.
Yeah, totally. If you're playing Boros and they fire off a beacon bolt, you're like, oh no, like they just always kill 2 relevant creatures. Wow, this Izzet deck is really coming together. We Dragonauts is next.
Ooh, I like this one too. I actually think I like this more than the beacon bolt. It just takes a little bit less work and is consistently great.
Yeah, I agree. A 1/3 flyer for 3 turns out isn't even that bad. And then when it becomes a 3/3 flyer, most of the time it's quite good. And occasionally get to bash in for 7 or whatever. Izzet Guild Gate, by the way, is our gate. So yeah, the sealed deck Izzet for this one is really good. We got a mythic rare though. We have Underrealm Lich.
Well, Underrealm Lich is really good. It does get hit by a couple of the removal spells at common, like Artful Dodge, for example. But if this lives, each draw step you have is fire, and it does resist a lot of removal, plus being okay in combat, right? You can block and then make it indestructible. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, it's a 3 green black 4/3. You can pay 4 life to give it indestructible until end of turn and tap it. If you would draw a card instead, look at the top 3 cards and then put 1 in your graveyard. 1 in your hand and the rest into your graveyard. I would take it. I mean, I don't know. Like, we Dragonauts might just be better, but I like Underrealm Lich quite a bit, and it has a really powerful effect if you get to untap with it. I mean, going through your library that quickly, you just tend to find.
You also can't get decked when you have this in play.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, nice little bonus.
Yeah, and there's some decks that can't remove it. You know, they just can't get it out of the way, and so you're good to go. I would take the Lich. What would you take?
Yeah, I would take the Lich for sure. I actually don't think that's particularly close.
Okay. Yeah, I do like the Dragonauts.
I mean, We Dragonauts is good, but the Underrealm Lich is just a bomb level card.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, let's get into the question and answers here. We've got a whole bunch of them. We'll get through as many as we can, and then any that are left over, I'll probably put on a file and maybe try to do a little bit later on my own or something. I don't know. We got so many of them. It's a blessing and a curse, right? It's awesome. Like, you know, our patrons are great and they give us these great questions, but also like can only fit so many in. So first one comes from Paul, who says, you mentioned last Level Up episode that one of the best things about Magic is its complexity and the fact that you always have more to learn. You guys have played for a while, especially you, Luis. How much do you still learn? Is the complexity still overwhelmingly awesome as it is to us mortals?
Well, definitely have still, plenty to learn, both of us. And it's of a different sort, though. So I don't feel, you can correct me, if I'm wrong, or because I don't want to speak for you, but I don't feel like we're probably that overwhelmed by the complexity anymore, because we kind of know what we're in for. But for limited especially, and also for standard more than the older formats, every time a new set comes out, you have to learn all the quirks of it. And a lot of the stuff, part of the reason we have a set re-review is that in our set review, we'll say this card's good or this card's bad and be really off on some of the cards because, well, context is different. Sometimes there are new cards with weird abilities and it's like, wow, this doesn't look very good, and it ends up being great, or vice versa. There's always something new to learn, and figuring out the quirks of every format and every set is a pretty big challenge. And then the other thing, it's not exactly something new to learn, but if you don't play regularly, it falls off somewhat quickly. Like, it doesn't take much to shake the rust off, but I feel it when I don't play for a couple months. Not that I ever stop playing completely, but when I don't pay attention to a format for a couple months, I definitely feel it when I go back to it. I currently am not very practiced in Modern because I haven't really had a reason to play Modern recently. I'm sure there's a ton of just incremental knowledge that I need to work back up in Modern if I start playing again.
And anytime you're bouncing around from any formats, it does that. And of course, like you mentioned before, we get that naturally occurring thing with Limited every time a new set comes out anyway. We have to tackle that. Yeah, for me, you were right. Feel like I have the moving parts down for Magic for the most part. But at the same time, I'm on this mistake, ride, right? Where I get on and I stop making certain mistakes, but then I make other ones and I forget. And then when I clean up that mess again, then I start making the mistakes that I wasn't making prior. And I can just never really put it all together where I feel like, okay, I'm good. I've got this. I know it. It's always just this constant fight to keep myself in check. And then, so that's kind of how it gets expressed for me now, is that it's just, I never just find myself in positions where I'm just like, I got it. I know it. I'm good. I just always feel I'm kind of not confident, right? Just like a little bit like, I'm probably not doing something right, or how will I ever really know? And that kind of keeps me interested. Scott Pease, hey Scott, says, the next Pro Tour format is team basketball 5-on-5. Who's your squad? Oh, I like this. This is good.
Well, so if it's the Pro Tour, I'm gonna assume you have to draw from like the pool of like basically qualified players right now.
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to expand that out to coverage. You can coverage people.
Well, okay. If I'm including coverage, then my team would be Huey, you for sure. Probably Ben S, because Ben S does play a lot. And I'm not really sure who. Oh, Cheon for sure. All right. So
there you go.
Coverage. In fact, all of those people have done coverage. Maybe. Just maybe there's a connection there. And I guess I'm assuming I have to be the fifth, but I'll be a distant fifth in this particular company.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go straight coverage team, which I'm including you on, by the way. So me and you, and then I would go JVL, Corbin.
You got to have the hustler. I knew you were going to say Corbin.
Yeah, and Paul. Because he does coverage too.
All right, that's fair.
There's my team.
I mean, yeah, I think that team would be pretty good. Obviously, if you want to win the tournament, you don't go straight coverage. But no, that's true of either.
Well, unless it's a coverage tournament, I guess. Next one comes from Sean, who says, "How do you keep track of your curve properly when drafting in person? I find it easy to do on Magic, where of course you can see it on the screen, but struggle in real pods where I can't constantly see my picks."
Have a good memory.
Yeah. That was predicted by somebody who actually asked another question later. That does help, but I mean, you do get to look in between. Like I just, you develop a sort of a sixth sense for it, right? Where I'm kind of like, I feel like I'm low on 2 drops. I can remember these 2 that I picked, and I don't really think I have any more that I want to put in my deck. And then when you get to the end of the pack, I just have like a little laundry list in my head of like, okay, how many 2s in it? Okay, I've only got 2. I definitely need to focus on that. How many 5s do I have? I'm probably only going to play these 2, so I could probably have one more in there. You know, looking at things like that. Am I really red blue, or do I have a whole bunch of red cards and like one blue card that, you know, my brain told me, you know, that those are the things I check on, because you do get to look, right? It's not like the entire draft you don't get to look.
No, and what you said is very true, where you have to look at, like, remember the 2s, remember the 5s. You honestly don't even have to remember the 3s and the 4s. You always end up with a good amount of 3s and 4s. Mm-hmm. Like, it would take something really weird where you're like looking at your pile after pack 2 and you're like, wow, I have nine 3-drops. Then you're like, okay, maybe cool off on the 3-drops a little bit. But for the most part, if you can remember how many 2s you have and how many expensive, like 5+ cards you have, that's plenty. Like, you don't need to know the exact number of all of them. And in between packs, I'll sort my cards really quickly. I have like exact sorting hierarchy. On the left is creatures from low to high cost, and then there's spells from low to high cost. So if you ever see me stream or draft videos, I actually do it that way there too. Just keep it consistent. And it looks random, right? So you see a pile of creatures and a pile of spells of all different costs, it looks like, but it is low to high creatures, low to high spells. Because the other thing is your spells don't matter that much for your curve either. Like, cards like Deadweight do, because you can substitute those for early drops, but you're kind of like random, you know, spells that are not necessarily removal or whatever, just like your spells that, like a divination or a combat trick, those don't count towards your curve, because you don't play them on curve instead of a play usually. So
yeah, what I used to do, like on my draft videos, I still do it sometimes, is I'll lay out my curve, and I'll put the spells where I actually expect to cast them on average. Right? Like divination would be, you know, turn 5 or 6, you know, 5 or 6 lands or somewhere in that range. Sometimes 3, but, you know, sometimes not. Removal spells, right? Like, let's say you have a really good removal spell, like a cast down, you know, a 2-mana removal spell. You know, it's really rare that you cast that on turn 2, right? That's almost unheard of unless your opponent has very specific cards. It usually ends up happening turn 6, right? Somewhere around that range when they play their good 4-drop or their good 5-drop, and you're like, okay, kill that. And, you know, that's the kind of value. And that can help you, like, conceptualize it just like one little nuanced step further. But the key is the creatures, as you said, Luis. That's the number one thing. Let's see. Jonathan says, hey, guys, great show. I started out in Magic with limited, and I feel good about my game. I recently started taking advantage of all my draft rares laying around to cheaply buy into standard, thanks to channelfireball.com's excellent store credit program, #branding. Thank you, Jonathan. He says, unfortunately, I'm getting absolutely destroyed. Other than knowing what the good decks are, I feel completely lost, like Adam Morrison transitioning from college ball to the NBA. Wow, that is such a savage beat, Jonathan. Are there any tips you can give us for a limited player starting out in Constructed?
Certainly, I would say that getting a lot of practice with a deck. I've seen people go into the cycle where they like pick up a deck, play it, don't do well with it, and try to switch to a different deck, when a lot of it is you just need to stick with the same thing to really start to maximize your plays and your ability to win with that deck. The other thing is pay attention to what's going on in the metagame. Like, it does matter. The metagame of draft is real and it does matter to a degree, but you could also kind of ignore that. Like, if, let's say you started drafting guilds, right, and you drafted it for a couple weeks and you got really into it, and then you didn't draft it for a month and came back. You don't need to really know that much. What you learned before is gonna hold up. The same is not true in Constructed. You really do need to take a look at what the lists are that do well on Magic Online or Top 8 at Grand Prix, because that is going to matter when it's like, oh, this mono blue deck now plays like 9 main deck counter spells, and it plays these ones. It has got dive downs in it. Like these are the kind of things you just have to know about so that you can play around your opponent's cards, because so much of Constructed is predicting what your opponent has and playing around it, because it's so much more predictable. Because in Constructed, you can guess most people's deck lists very quickly.
Right. Yeah, you're right way more often when you guess in Constructed. Next one comes from Joe, who says, with the discussion about green in guilds being noticeably worse than the other colors, it got me thinking, how much does the relative power between colors impact the quality of the draft format? If one color is slightly worse than the others, does that make the format worse? Or is it a matter of you just have to learn that you won't play this color as often as the others without significantly damaging the format?
Oh, I think that unless it's a lot worse, it's not that bad.
Yeah. Yeah, if there's an extreme outlier in either direction, that usually has a really bad effect on the format. Yeah,
it ends up being like, green in Battle for Zendikar, which is basically undraftable.
Do you remember black in original Zendikar back in the day?
Right, or black. Like, I remember for sealed especially, you go up to a land station, there'd be no swamps or mountains.
Right. Yeah, remember
80% of people played that.
Yeah, what was it? There was a print run that had like Sorin and like Ob Nixilis in it or something. I remember there was 2 absurd black cards that like you would see routinely at PTQs. They don't do that anymore. But anyway.
Yeah, so I think that in general, it's fine. Like the power differential between the guilds here is a good example. Like, they're not all equal, but they're close enough that any open one is still good to be in. I think once you get past that point, then it's problematic. When you could tell me green is wide open, no one's drafting it, and I'm still like, yeah, I probably shouldn't draft it. That's bad, because that just means a lot of cards are just kind of blanks or traps for people who don't know that the color's that bad.
Right.
And so it takes a lot to get to that point, though. For the most part, if it's plus or minus, 10% or whatever, it's fine.
Yeah, and that is usually most sets fall into that. Next one comes from Dan, who says, "Hey guys, love what you do. Thanks for such amazing content each and every week." You're welcome, Dan. I've found that in my drafts that Dimir, while powerful, oftentimes has a lot of air in it. Card draw, lockets, muse drakes, which I probably value too highly, he says. So I've flooded a lot. Is it reasonable to play 16 lands in these kind of decks? And, this is really interesting because he goes further. He says, what about pairing few lands in these decks with copies of Radical Idea? I've been on the fence as whether this card is favorable in the controlling Dimir archetype. This is an interesting question because he went pretty deep. He noticed that he's got a lot of air, which I think a lot of people don't notice. They just, this card's fine, this is a card draw, this is good, but then they kind of don't ever really do anything. But then he actually goes into this direction of like, should I be playing Radical Idea in 16 lands in these decks? And also questions whether whether Radical Idea is even good at all in these type of decks. In my experience, it is not good at all. I do not like Radical Idea in the controlling Dimir decks at all. I just basically never run it. The payoffs are very minimal. And the problem that it exemplifies the problem that he's talking about perfectly, right? Radical Idea is the perfect, I'd like to flood out card, right? If you're not getting, some type of triggered ability off of the fact that you cast a spell or benefiting from the fact that it's in your graveyard or exile, it is exactly the type of card you don't want to be playing. And I would not play it, and I wouldn't play 16 lands in these decks either.
No, it actually goes the other way around, where the more card draw you have, it usually means the more land you can play. Because imagine a Dimir deck with like 2 Notion Rains and a Muse Drake. If you hit your 3rd land drop, you're not going to flood out very often because you have all these good card draw spells. So you just want to make sure you don't miss your third land drop. Whereas like a 16 land aggro deck, part of the way a 16 land deck is constructed is that it can get stuck on 2 lands for 2 turns and still cast a spell each turn and then draw its third land and be fine and not have flooded out. These decks get so punished when you miss your land drop. So I like the ideas, Dan, but they're both wrong. So it's good to be thinking this way. This is how you find new stuff. But I would actually go the opposite direction, not play Radical Idea and play more lands.
Yeah, and by the way, I really like, Dan, that you noticed that the card draw, the lockets, and the Muse Drakes are, as you put it, air, and they can be. You do need to make sure you have enough impact cards in your deck to actually get the job done. Jonathan asks, top 5 snacks you can carry on you at a GP. I've got I power ranked it here.
I'll let you take care of this one.
Right. So number 5, some stupid bar, right? A kind bar or a whatever they're called, prescription bar or whatever. Those are boring, but fine. Number 4, dried pineapple. Savagely underrated. And by the way, any dried fruits, we're not talking about the stupid candied ones that you get at like Costco. I'm talking about like just the fruit that has the moisture taken out of it. Don't do the sugared one. That's not good. Number 3, oh God, I love this one. Dried mango.
Yeah, dried mango is really good, especially with the chili on it.
Oh yeah, you can get that too, where it's like dusted with the chili and it kind of makes it hot. That's pretty good too. Number 2, a banana. Obviously, bananas are great. And number 1, the all-time number 1 best snack that you can carry with you at a GP, pistachios. I love pistachios. I have them with me most of the time when I'm traveling at these things because I get hungry in between rounds. Can't necessarily get away to get some food, and my brain stops working if I don't eat. So pistachios it is. Do you have anything to add, Luis, or should we move on to the next question?
No, that seems pretty good. My plan is either some stupid bar or just wait till afterwards. Like, I am just not one for snack food. I love, as much as I love eating, it's just surprising. I just don't snack really. It's not really in my repertoire.
You view it as a missed opportunity for a meal,
right? I just save those calories up and get a better meal. Obviously,
there you go. Heather asks us, "Howdy, Marshall and Luis. I'm a beginner still learning card evaluation. This is one of the, by the way, this question is awesome. Singles prices correlated to card quality and limited? For example, Aurelia is $15 on channelfireball.com #branding. And she's an awesome card for Boros decks from what I've seen. However, Beast Whisperer is only $2 and he does work in the right limited deck as well. Obviously, singles prices can be impacted by demand from EDH, standard, or even modern legacy players. But I do often hear comments about card price around the draft table, and I wondered if market indicators may be useful in making my picks. Love the show, and thanks for making it. Thanks, Heather. What a great question. We've never been asked this before, and I bet you a lot of people wonder this, right? Because you sit down, especially if you're relatively new to draft, and you go to the local store and somebody's like, just paid for my draft, but does that mean the card's good for limited?
In general, there's a correlation for sure. Like,
there is, strangely, right? It's very weird because it can be completely off, but there is a correlation. There's
a correlation because powerful cards are the cards that tend to do well in constructed, and powerful cards tend to be good and limited. Where it breaks down is stuff like Mox Opal. That was it's now like $100, strangely enough.
Holy crap! Really? Wow.
But it wasn't really good in limited. It's like the really linear cards that take a lot of work to be good. Whereas the cards that are just there on raw power level, Aurelia is a good example. Teferi, like these are cards that are worth a lot because they're powerful and they would be good and limited. The flip side too is that there are cards like Multani, which not worth a ton, but was the best card in Dominaria, or uncommons like Icy Manipulator, right?
That's right.
So in general, I think I wouldn't try to use that as a barometer, though. In most drafts you're in, if you open a $15 card, you should just take it.
And that's a different discussion, but it's true, right? I mean, that if you can help offset the cost, you should do it. Yeah.
When I want to practice, I tend not to rare draft. I remember people losing their minds because I passed a foil Thoughtseize or something at one point in a video. Mm-hmm. But the pragmatic side of me does not want to dissuade people from rare drafting. Look, if you open a foil Tarmogoyf, just take the foil Tarmogoyf flick.
Okay, all right, buddy. Question.
Is that a different question?
That's a different question. Yeah. So basically what we're saying here, Heather, is that while there is a correlation, it's not reliable. So you can't necessarily know. But yeah, hey, the money's not bad either. And you're completely correct that the demand from EDH Standard, Modern, and Legacy are what drive the prices, particularly EDH and Modern seem to really drive the prices on cards. So if the card's going to be good in a deck there, then the price could go up. Also, don't forget rarity, right? Like, you compared Aurelia and Beast Whisperer, but Beast Whisperer is a regular rare, which even if it was as good as Aurelia, would be worth far less just because of straight up rarity, like how many cards are printed.
I mean, that is a confounding factor here for sure.
Right. So great question. Thank you, Heather, for that. Mike says, in the single game arena drafts, do focused sideboard cards get played in the main deck more often, or should they be ignored while drafting? Does not getting to sideboard change your draft in other ways? So Mike is referring to Magic Gathering Arena, which I, by the way, recommend playing. I have been playing it a lot. I think that they've made big strides on it. I think it's really fun. And it's an open beta, so anybody can do it now. And they have two different types of drafts on there. They've got quick draft, where you can buy in with either gold, which you can earn in the game just by playing or hitting certain goals, or gems, which you can buy for money. And in those, you draft against AI, and then you build your deck, and then you play a best of one matches. You can win up to 7 of them or lose up to 3, whichever happens first. And then you climb your way up the chain with the prize payouts for that. Or you can play in competitive drafts, which you can only buy in for with gems. So that means that you have to either earn them by winning stuff or buy them with money. And that's a normal draft, except for, at least right now, it's still against AI. But then you build your deck, and then you play best 2 out of 3 matches until you get to either 5 wins or 2 losses, and the prizes are higher for that one. So Mike is asking us about the first one. And what the reason he's asking is because you don't ever play a sideboarded game ever. So should you be putting in narrow sideboard cards in your main deck from like a fundamental strategic angle? And the answer is no, right? I mean, you're really spinning the wheel if you put like a very narrow sideboard card that's good against one of the archetypes, but not the other 4. It's presumably only going to hit 20%, or if it's one of the more popular archetypes, maybe that gets bumped up to 30 or 35 or something. But the other times you're going to have a card that doesn't do anything in your hand. So the best plan is to have whatever the best plan A is against people who don't have access to a sideboard. And that often means aggression and Boros, because, there's a lot of times when you play against a Boros deck and they kick the crap out of you game 1, but then you completely change the configuration of your deck for a lower curve, more defensive speed. You bring in some crabs. Some crabs. I was going there, and then you have an advantage in the next 2 games. If you never let your opponent have that, time to adjust, then you may be better off being more proactive. Basically, when you're drafting, when it comes to the sideboard cards, they kind of just get ignored now. I mean, unless they're like good enough to main deck, in which case, like a Crushing Canopy or something like that, that's just a card you can main deck anyway. But if we're talking about true sideboard cards, yeah, I just think you just leave them in the board. You don't bother drafting them either.
Yeah, I think that
kind of a weird strategy.
It's a little different, but you get used to it.
Yeah. Kyle says, "Hey guys, are either of you dressing up for Halloween?" You dressed up for Halloween, didn't you?
Yeah. So
I didn't, but
I have look. I decided that because I had so much fire for competition this year, I dressed up as the fire. I actually I had a sriracha shirt and bright orange feather bow and an orange beanie. That was it.
Now hold on. I was promised a picture of this. Was this? Did this get tweeted or something?
I tweeted a picture.
Okay, cool. I just didn't see it.
If you go to twitter.com/LC, you will find it.
Okay. Oh man, the hottest of fires. Huh?
Look, it was a combination of this is actually what I wanted to dress up as, and I was making do with what I had. So, but no, I enjoyed it. I like Halloween. Halloween's fun.
I did not dress up, but I would have if I had the occasion to. I just didn't. Yeah, no, it's not that. David says, if you could do a draft with 3 packs from any set or sets ever, what would you want to draft and why? He said they can be from all the same set, different sets, or any combination. You know what I'm feeling right now?
Which feeling?
I'm feeling a little triple cons.
Ooh, I like cons.
I would just do that. Like, I'm just like right now. I'm just in triple cons. That's what I would do.
When it came back on Magic Online, I was like, wow, this is great.
Yeah, really, it's an all-timer. And right now, Innistrad's on Magic Online, so that's kind of sweet too. But
this is slightly this is kind of like not in the spirit of the question exactly, but cracking those beta packs was a pretty transcendent experience. Just knowing I got to open the pack and keep the cards inside was
that is insane. Yeah. I got to open one with BDM. We did a crack-a-pack of beta. It felt awesome. Like the cards look so cool. They're so dark and like
feel the history in the pack and the cards.
You really can. It's weird because think of other games in sports. Like there isn't a corollary for this, right? Like we can't go replicate what it was like to be Babe Ruth, right? Like we're not going to play with some crappy glove and a ball that's been smashed to dust. It's. I don't know.
It's like getting to play like a 1959 Les Paul guitar or whatever. Like,
yeah, there you go. Yeah, it's like that. It's like getting to play some really great vintage something.
Yeah, or 100-year aged whiskey or whatever.
Right. Yeah, it's closer to that. You're right. Than like
it's got a lot of parallels, right? You're cracking open a consumable. The cards still exist, but the pack never does anymore. Tim Ayton had the best quote on this. Actually, he said that. When he was talking about the alpha starter that I won in that thing, he was like, you can keep it sealed and then it's just a box. Or you can open it and there's just a little less magic left in the world.
Oh, man. No pressure. Wow, that is a great quote. Next question comes from our friend Scalding Hot Soup.
I played him in the beta draft.
Oh, you did?
Yes.
That's awesome.
This is Ian. I played him round one of the beta draft. So.
Yeah. Ian's very active in Twitch chat. If you've ever been in there, you'll see
he's a good dude.
Yes. He says, here's a question I think both Luis and Marshall will like. In game theory, there are a variety of strategical frameworks which you can use to make decisions. These frameworks broadly fall into pure and mixed strategies. Pure strategies have rigid heuristics for individual scenarios, like never attack a 2/2 into a 2/3 without backup, whereas mixed strategies instead have a range of options to prevent the player from falling into exploitable patterns. For example, if a format has a -1/-1 trick like fungal infection, a mixed strategist might argue that a player should bluff attack a 2/2 into a 2/3 some percentage of the time, but hold back the majority of the time. Assuming a mixed strategy is optimal for limited, which I think it would be, given what we've seen here, how do you determine what our range of decisions and probabilities should look like? Or is this maybe a bit too deep for Magic and better left for the poker players?
So it's not quite, you're not going to be able to find quite as defined a heuristic as you would for poker, partially because poker, the range of hands you can have is a lot lower. And like there's also far fewer actual game pieces. So you're going to end up, being able to make up rules that work a lot better. That said, a mixed strategy is definitely optimal for limited. And we can talk about a couple of the different things that would change your range of decisions and your probabilities without being able to really set those in stone. So, I think the main things that go into deciding when to bluff, because you should bluff some of the time. You definitely should.
Yeah, think about it. If you never bluff, that can never be correct, right?
Yeah, you're leaving damage on the table, and that damage matters sometimes. One of the most satisfying games on stream I played is when I bluffed the point of damage in on turn 3, and I told chat to remember it, and then like 10 turns later,
I won
exactly.
That.
Yeah.
Yes, you won by exactsies, and you're like that glorious 1 point of bluff damage. Right. I remember that.
So when you're deciding whether to bluff, you have to decide what is it going to cost your opponent to call. If my opponent plays like an awesome creature, like a Thief of Sanity, right, on turn 3, I'm attacking my Generous Straight into that card every time.
Every single time. Yeah.
So listeners of the show, if you've got a Thief of Sanity and I attack, I'm definitely bluffing. Because
good.
Yeah. I'm just setting it up. Just tiny edges,
mixed strategy there. Nice. Yep.
So if it's very costly for your opponent to call, they're less likely to call. So bluffs have a way higher success ratio when you're attacking into something that's very valuable. The second is like, how likely is it that you have this? If you're playing like, a color combination that doesn't have very many tricks, then your opponent's more likely to be like, what are you even representing here? This doesn't make sense. I'm just going to block. So you have to bluff in a way that like actually has tricks. If you have 1 mana up and you attack in a format without a 1 mana combat trick in that color, it's just not going to work.
Yeah, that's the Woodrow Angle bluff right there.
Oh, yeah. Well, if you don't know what you're not bluffing, or if you don't know what you're bluffing, then that's an even more convincing bluff.
Well, you can certainly sell it, yeah.
The other is, once your opponent has seen something, you can kind of exploit that information. Because let's say it's game 3, and your opponent's already seen 2 fungal infections. Oh yeah, you can attack your 2/2 into their 2/3, and that's even a good example because fungal infection is particularly punishing because when it works, you end up with a 1/1 in play, so it's even high upside, and it's so cheap. So if you've shown your opponent some 3-mana combat tricks, I would be less inclined to try to bluff on turn 4 because if I'm the opponent and you had that card face up, I'd still block. You're totally fine trading for their 3 mana. So you just have to consider how valuable their thing is, what's going to cost them, how valuable or how likely it is that you'll have the thing that you're bluffing. And then the last part is how much the bluff is worth by itself. Like if your opponent's at 4 and you attack with a 2/2, they're just going to block. Because if you had a combat trick, they're dead. If they're at 20, they're way less likely to. So don't make bluffs that your opponent's forced to call. It just won't work.
It's really interesting too, because you can do some kind of mental exercises to realize the extent to which this goes.
There's leveling here for sure.
Yeah. Like for example, let's just take a situation that you couldn't actually do in game, but would illustrate the extremes to which people will or won't block. In this case, won't. So let's say I do play that Thief of Sanity, right? And let's say you're Luis, you draw your card. You play, let's say your 3rd land or your 4th, whatever. You're on 3 lands and you have that 1/2 cat on the battlefield. I'm at 20 life, okay? And you go, I attack, and then you say, but before you make your decision on whether to block, you have 5 cards in your hand. You're like, you can reveal any 4 of my cards. So I go, okay, and I flip up 4 of your cards, and none of them are combat tricks. I still wouldn't block. Right? Like that 1 damage is still not worth it because even 1 hit with the Thief of Sanity is really tough to come back from. And I might just be able to take over the game with that. And so there's almost no cost, right? To me, like there's almost nothing that I would pay in order to make that block happen. Even if I got it narrowed down to like the most minuscule line of information that I could get, I still wouldn't block, because of the extreme upside. I just simply am willing to trade that 1 point of damage and I don't care about it in relation to what I'm getting back on the other side. And then, it goes the other way. Like you said, if you're low on life, there's basically nothing that will convince you not to block. You will block under all circumstances. And those are the extremes. Of course, the middle is the part that we try to deal with the most.
Yeah. And bluffing is really interesting. It doesn't seem like there's a good way to really give you set rules, but if you want some like rough heuristics, I think we can provide that. One is when your opponent plays something really valuable, if they play like, a Niv Mizzet level of creature, they're often not going to block. And if they're at a really high life total, you have a lot more agency to start bluffing in. So I think that it's a good idea to incorporate some bluffs into your game. I don't know what percentage of the time you should be doing that. There's just so many different factors that change from format to format.
Yeah, I've found that in a very general sense, bluffing in Magic doesn't happen that frequently. It's the situation that has to line up in a certain way because a lot of times people are just racing and then there's no bluffing to be had, that kind of thing. So keep that stuff in mind. But when it does pop up, like you said, even that 1 point that you bluff in might make the difference. Martin says, hey guys, thanks for your great work and well-prepared shows. My question is, in a set with special lands like the Guild Gates, when would be the right time to pick them in drafting your deck? Ooh, that's a broad question, Martin. Yeah,
but I think it's not that complicated. I take them above most like medium playables, most like C level cards. So basically I rate them about a C plus where like if I'm drafting a Dimir deck and, especially later in the draft, I'll take a gate over something in the middle of the pack, like something, Dimir
like the Veiled Shade or something, right?
Well, way over Veiled Shade, but I'm even talking something a little better than that. Just because like having 2 Guild Gates in your 2-color deck is just going to make it a lot less likely that you get mana screwed.
Yeah, and I usually do want 2, by the way. This set, of course, is a little weird because there's 1 in every pack. So as long as you're going to see a lot of them throughout the course of the draft, and then you just need to pick up the ones that are on your guild. In a normal set, you don't see them quite as often. There may be a cycle.
In a normal set. But also normal sets don't have the CCDD mana cost like Night Veil Predator.
Totally. Yeah. Oof. I love that card, by the way. Next one comes from Peter, who says, hey, I've been playing for many years, and one thing I'm struggling with is sideboarding differently with being on the play or the draw in mind. You sometimes talk about sideboarding in or out a land, depending on being on the play or the draw. Can you help me understand the concept better? This is an interesting one, right? There's certain types of cards. Sometimes it's a land, but usually, there's certain types of cards that really benefit from being on the play versus on the draw in certain matchups. Usually it does require, at least for me, to make a decision based on play draw. I don't it's rare that I'll just have cards that I'm automatically taking in and out. Like you'll see in Constructed that can be the case, but in Limited, it's usually not just play draw, but also the matchup. Like I kind of need all of that information before I actually make that call.
Though you are more likely to want to side out a land on the draw or side in a land on the play, just because those are the situations where you have a little bit more or less wiggle room depending on which one you're going. I think in general you want to, if you're going to be on the draw, you want to maybe speed up your deck, and if you're going to be on the play, then you want to make it so that your deck is more consistent. Maybe it doesn't need like as many resources to function. It's not like a huge difference, but if it's the sort of thing where it's like a tiebreaker, where if you're like, I don't know if this is a 17 or 18 land deck, and it's like, well, on the play, I'd rather have 18, on the draw 17. That is legitimate.
Mm-hmm. For sure. So keep that in mind, Martin. Excuse me, Peter. The other question was from Martin. Next one comes from Luciano, who says, "Hey, Marshall and Luis, if you could design a complete set for Limited, ignoring constructed restrictions, what would be your goals?" And he wants to know if we create something like a master set or go a completely different way, and how we'd balance mana fixing, synergy, complexity, and all that kind of stuff. This is a great question, because it has a personal element to it, right? The kind of stuff that I would want to see and that you would want to see, but also, you and I are both, we wouldn't want to design just the set for us, right? Like I'd want this to be fun and balanced and stuff. The things that come to mind for me just offhand, I value interaction. I've definitely value balance. Like, my perfect set would be very, very well balanced between colors and strategy, so that when you started out the draft, you really didn't know where you're going to go and you could end up anywhere. I would try for non-linear strategies, meaning that I wouldn't do tribal. I wouldn't do any like firm 2-color pairs or anything like that. I just don't want a draft to ever really feel like it's on rails. I want to be open, and even coming into pack 2 that I might change directions or try something a little different or add a third color or something like that. And then I would want some form of smoothing of draws. Like I like people to be able to play games of Magic, and it benefits, better players or whatever too. But, cycling or any of these mechanics that Luis and I love, some scry or whatever, to help smooth things out, to make sure that both people get to cast their spells. And then the last thing I really do like is inevitability. I like decks that give you late game mana sink. So I would have Morph or Flashback or something like that, so that I could do stuff early or late with a lot of my cards. That would be my goals.
Yeah, I think I would share a lot of the same goals. I like sets that have a lot of uncommon build arounds. I like sets that are a little bit more freeform. Yeah. Well, one of the problems I had with like Masters Edition, or Eternal Masters 1. What am I? Which set am I talking about? All these sets. Modern Masters. There we go. Uh-huh. Yes, they all blend together so much. Where the lanes were so well defined, like affinity, tokens, fairies, that once you started going down that path, you didn't diverge much. And that's kind of the problem I have with guilds, actually. I like it being a little bit more freeform, where you have a lot of decks that overlap in ways that you can go one direction or another, or kind of in the middle of both. But I would still have Beatdown be a viable deck. I think it's much more interesting when some people get to beat down and some people don't, than when Beatdown is just a laughably bad strategy. That can be okay, but I think like on a 1 to 10, I would usually have this where 1 is the fastest and 10 is the slowest. I'd have the speed probably be around a 7, and then synergy and complexity. I mean, if we're just being self-indulgent, I have those be pretty high. Okay, and then mana fixing, I like having a lot of mana fixing too. One of my main criticisms of IPA or Shards of Alara is just that don't actually have quite enough mana fixing, but the gold cards are so powerful you have to play them anyways, which leads to a lot of like, did I hit turn 3 Woolly Thoktar or did I not?
Or did I never get to cast it and I lost? Yeah, big difference. Matt says, I'm always wanting to hear more about cube drafting on Magic Online and perpetually 2-1 and rarely crack through to go 3-0. Any tips for getting over the hump? Well, I mean, my strategies usually involve, you have to know the decks. You have to know what decks are good before you go in, or at least know how to draft one of the archetypes well. And then I try to usually skew things towards very powerful cards early that are irreplaceable. Cards that I can be big payoffs or build arounds, like, opposition or, some of the big payoffs along those lines. I really, really like. And then I mentioned before, but if you know your basics, it really helps. Like if you know how the ramp decks work in a format, whether it's artifact-based, creature-based, or spell-based ramp, what the payoffs are for that, how you can finish the game, there's a lot of different play patterns that emerge when you have those redundant cards. Because like a lot of these cubes, for example, on the ramp tip, they have like all the elves. They just play like every, version of Llanowar Elf and 2 mana, make a bunch of mana elf that's ever been printed, basically. And you're going to be able to pick up enough of those as long as you're, in that strategy and nobody else is cutting it from you. But you need to know what are the key payoff cards or the ones that you can pass on because you get something down the line anyway. And that is true for Reanimator, for the control decks, for the aggro decks, for everything. You just need to get those basics down. And then what I recommend doing is kind of trying to get really good at one of them and then branch out from there because it's just too overwhelming to try to get good at all of them at once. Like Cube is complicated and you're going to be reading a lot of cards when you're newer at it. I know Matt's not. He's not new at it, but still, that's just advice for.
Well, the other thing is, I think that since we've seen this feedback a lot, I think people who go 2-1 a lot don't realize how much harder it is to go 3-0 than 2-1 because it's not just I went 2-0 and lost in the finals. You can also go 2-1 by losing in round 1 or round 2. There's a lot of different paths that get you to 2-1. There's only one path that gets you to 3-0, and that's winning all your matches. Mm-hmm. So. In terms of like an 8-player draft, if there's 1 3-0, 3 2-1s, 3 1-2s, and an 0-3, like it isn't like, oh, I was either going to go 2-1 or 3-0 and I keep losing. I should be 3-0 half the time and 2-1 half the time. You should be 2-1 like 3 times as often as 3-0. So
that's a great point. Yeah.
So yeah, don't get caught up in that. And then take cheaper cards when you play Cube. I think if everyone just lowered their curve and took Preordain and Mana Leak and Noble Hierarch over expensive cards, they would do a lot better. Every card in Cube is so good. Just have more cheap ones and you'll do better.
Matt also has a follow-up question. I'm going to need to know, he says, if you eat your M&Ms by color, and if so, what's the color hierarchy?
do different colored M&Ms taste different?
I don't think so. Whenever somebody puts M&Ms in front of me, it's a handful scenario. Like I'm just jamming a whole bunch of them at once. I definitely don't have I think they're just different, like actual color, right? They're not flavored that way.
I think that answers the question.
I might have been missing out though. Yeah. Andy says, when you work out, Luis, cardio or weights preferred? You like to lift or you like to run?
I find lifting to be a lot more efficient and satisfying.
Do you even lift though?
These between the set reviews and the Pro Tour, it's kind of been, kicking my butt. I have not been. Man,
you answered my "do you even lift?" question straight up. Like,
I know.
It's a meme.
Well, it's because I feel guilty.
Oh, okay. Well, it was.
Look, after the Pro Tour, I'll get back to it. But it is hard. Yeah. I don't know. I wish there was another hour in the day that I could make use of that. But I would also feel the same after 2 weeks getting used to that extra hour, and then I wish there was another one.
Yeah. Just be glad we don't have 23
Stuff
hours.
It's like water or liquid. It just fills the available container.
That is very true. Simon says, guys, thanks so much for all the work you put in, for the awesome content you put out every week, and for staying passionate for Limited after hundreds of episodes. As one of many who've come back to Magic after an extended hiatus, I can say you've given me significant leg up with Limited, where years ago I never played a single draft. Thank you, Simon. That was it. There's actually no question. Thank you, Simon. That was really nice of you to say. We appreciate that. Michael says, thank you so much for all you do. With only being able to draft roughly once or twice a week and never forcing an archetype, what do you think is the best metric to measure improvement? I don't want to fall into the trap of just looking at win rates, but with such small sample sizes, I find it difficult to look beyond that. Great question, Michael. I mean, this is something I know that you care about, Luis, is measurables, right? Like, I want to get better at something. Well, let's set some metrics. Let's see, how we're improving. And Michael says, well, if I'm only drafting once or twice a week, how do I know? Well,
I like measurables, but I only like it when you actually have enough data. I think that's actually harmful. Like, I think that, Michael, if you kept track of your win rate, you would end up getting an inaccurate view because you're just not drafting enough to have it. There's just one match can drop your win rate by so much when you're only drafting once a week that it's not really that useful. Well, what I would go for is a feeling of mastery. That's what drives me, is a feeling of mastery. And honestly, you don't have to know what your win rate is to feel like you've mastered a format. It's when you just know what all the cards do, where all their values are, what you should take in the draft, and how to play out the decks, what the decks look like. Just when you kind of get that feeling, that's like, you're not always going to get that feeling. There's some formats you never get that feeling. There's some people who've never drafted enough to get that feeling. But as you feel yourself becoming more practiced and knowing what to do and what to look for, and it should improve set by set as well, that is, I think, a benchmark.
Yeah, a little hint that you can get from that too is things like when you're doing a line of play that you're trying to play around a certain card that you think your opponent might have, and then they did, right? Like, and maybe you ended up losing as a result, but that's when you know, okay, like I'm onto it here, right? Like I thought that they might have this card based on this information, and in this game, I actually got to find out that they did in fact have it. You know, that's little clues that you're starting to really pick up on what's going on in the format. Keep it up, Michael. It is tough. Battling sample size is one of the hardest things for us. If it was easy, this just would be less satisfying. Definitely. We certainly wouldn't be still doing this. Odin says, hey, Marshall and Luis, although I put an effort in to get better at the game, I prioritize having fun while playing. Since I don't get to draft as often as I'd like, I think I force decks a little too hard to be able to play sweet build-arounds and early rares because it might be my only chance I get to check out the cards before rotation. How much do you think this impacts my progression as a player? Is it a detriment to the degree that I should make an effort to stop and make my picks like a grown-up? This is a great question too, Odin, because the thing that I think is the most important here is that Odin overshadows this whole question with, look, I prioritize having fun. Right? Like that's what Odin's there to do. Odin is not showing up just to try to scrap out as many possible wins as they possibly can. So when you look at this question under that envelope, it really puts a lot of pressure on that part, right? Because what should you do? Well, you should do whatever you want. But if you want to win, yeah, you are going to have to stop doing these things that you're, trying to build sweet decks that do cool combos or whatever. Those almost for sure will not have the highest overall win percentage if you do that draft after draft. But it really comes down to what you prioritize, because if you just really want to have fun, then you should keep doing that. Like you don't have to try to win. That's just one thing that, it's just like how we like to play or whatever.
Odin, do not stop taking the build arounds.
Yeah. I don't stop believing, Odin.
And you're gonna get skilled at doing this. Like it's not gonna round out your game quite as much as trying to draft, optimally from the very beginning. But honestly, this is just way more fun. I do this too a lot of the time, and you get a good sense of how to build these decks, and then it helps you tackle new formats too. So, but also it's just great. So Magic is fun. If it's not fun, then I don't think that you're necessarily getting the most out of it.
Right, and I would hate it, Odin, to see you enjoying this and then decide, well, what I should be doing is I should be winning more, and then just not really enjoying it. That's not worth it.
We joke about eating your vegetables. First of all, vegetables are good. You should eat your vegetables.
Right, we both like vegetables. Yeah.
Second, I don't want people to get too lost in the sauce, as it were, and worry too much about exactly optimizing everything. Because trust me, by trying to optimize everything, you're actually not optimizing life. I firmly believe that.
Yeah, that is completely true. Next question comes from Janusz, I think is how it says. Hi, longtime listener, returning Patreon. Thank you. My friends' patrons always ask perfect questions, and Janusz gives kudos to everybody else. And I always wonder, do you read all the questions raised in this section? And by the way, the way this works if you're not on the Patreon is that I'll put up a post for these types of shows. Like if we're going to have a guest or if we're going to do a Q&A show, that's a fresh one just for that show where people can ask questions just for that. And then I have a post that I'll refresh once every few months for the Patreon question of the week. But that one we can mine questions from for quite a while because we're only doing one per week. But so Janusz is asking about, if we read every question in it, if so, how do you choose which ones are relevant and worth reading and which ones should be discarded or left as an inspiration for other episodes and topics? I love your show and energy and commitment. Thanks, and keep it up. I'm preparing for GP sealed event with you. Ever planning on visiting beautiful Warsaw? I would love to go to Warsaw. The problem for me is that the pesky European coverage team always gets to go over there and they cover those events. So I get locked out. And Luis, I'm assuming that flying to Europe for a GP is probably not in the cards for you at this point.
One of the first 4 GPs I ever went to was in Krakow, but
that's cool.
But it's not really in the cards right now. I mean,
yeah. To answer the question, go ahead.
I was going to say, with 6 Pro Tours next year, it's going to be difficult to go to the non-Pro Tour locations.
No, totally, yeah, and even to some of the Pro Tour locations. To answer your question, we do not ask every single or answer every single question in here. There's a few reasons for that. One of them is just simple. Like sometimes a question will get asked basically twice. And I'll try to attribute that to both of the people that do it when I see it. But I go through and I copy paste the questions in kind of one by one and make sure that they're all relevant. If there's a question that's not relevant, we usually won't. Like if it's just something that we would prefer to not talk about, or if it's, just a question that wouldn't be good for the listeners to hear answered, then we'll answer it offline. And then the other times it's just if there's too many, like we're not going to be able to get through all of them in this show. For example, we've got a million more, and that part's the toughest part because I want to get to all of them, and it's just there's just not enough time in the episode to do it, and we want to make sure that we do. So what I do is I put them in order that we got them. Like that's how roughly speaking, the first ones that get posted are the first ones that get in. And then I'll always remind people that if they don't have their question answered, that they can totally feel free to add it to the Patreon question of the week thread or to the next time that we do a show like this. Like if we didn't read it, it's almost 100% not that we just chose not to. It's just that we ran out of time or something like that. I mean, if you asked us about, something that had just nothing to do with nothing, then I guess there's a chance, but that's very rare. I've only had to do that a couple of times. So that's how we do it. With that, let's move on to the next one. Nicholas says, hey guys, I have a question about the power of nostalgia related to limited formats. Can you name any draft formats that you remembered being awesome, but came back 2 years after and realized it wasn't all that and a bag of chips? His was Triple Theros. Went back to that format and Nicholas decided it wasn't quite as good as he had remembered.
Oh yeah.
Which I don't remember it being good, so I guess I won't have that problem.
Well, I thought
has that happened to you?
I thought Triple Theros was kind of crap.
That's what I'm saying. I don't remember it being good in the first place. But
yes, I've talked about this before, but I think that original Ravnica is actually not that good of a draft format. And
oh yeah, that's a hot take too. I like that take.
Well, so here's the thing: when you go back and play, especially if it's on like a flashback draft, it's like, wow, this is fun. I'm winning a lot. This is really cool. But and when it was drafted back then, Limited was also a lot less developed in terms of like the players just did not go as deep. There wasn't unlimited resources. There weren't draft videos. None of those things, and people just didn't know what was good. Even like at the Pro Tour, even at the Grand Prix, that just information wasn't out there. Ravnica is just not that great of a format when people know what's going on. Like the best cards are like Lurking Informant, which lets you fate seal your opponent. Like you mill them out. You have Vidalcan Dismisser, 6-mana 2/2, put a creature back on top of their deck. Bounce lands are in the format, and if people don't know how good they are, you're just going to get a bunch of bounce lands. Like the gameplay is actually, I think, not as good as I remember. Like it's still fun when it comes back. I draft it, but it used to be like, wow, yeah, original Ravnica is one of the all-time greats, and I actually don't think that draft format is.
Yeah, that's interesting. I haven't had that experience, so I don't know any of them. The ones I've gone back to draft, which is pretty rare for me, I've enjoyed. Jethro says, hey, Luis, parentheses, and Marshall? What's up with that? I recently started playing Eternal. It makes sense now. And I was wondering if you had any tips or advice where I can get strategy, ideally a podcast similar to LR for the Direwolf digital card game. #branding.
Well, I do. There's a couple places I would check. EternalTitans.com is a fairly new website. It's got a lot of strategy on it, and it's got a lot of really competitive players trying to break down Eternal, and they have like what's the plays and stuff like that. And then RNG Eternal is also another website.com is also another website, and they do have a podcast. I'm not sure where to locate it exactly.
Is that like a team? Is that I remember? Was that the one that you had on your stream? Your
so RNG
test stream thing.
RNG is they run a tournament series, the Eternal Tournament Series. So it's like a fan
that's
third-party tournament
yeah.
series. We actually, because I'm one of the people who do make Eternal, we gave them a world slot. So their tournament series actually is going to be giving away one of the 16 seats to our Eternal World Championship next year, which has a $100,000 prize pool. So that's not nothing.
Ooh.
And those are both good places. You could also look at the Eternal card game subreddit. That has a lot of different links, and people, on the sideboard they have links, and people there can also point you in the right direction.
Okay. Francisco says, hey, Marshall and Luis, I have a question for you both. Can you guys pin down the moment when you realized that Magic the Gathering was most likely going to be a part of your lives for good? If there was such a moment, how was it? Where and when did it happen?
Well, when you say for good, you mean forever. Because I didn't know if that moment indicated to me it was going to be for good as in for benefit. But
yes,
it has been clearly. But for me, it was when, after having not played for a while and stopped playing in high school, and then I went to college, my second year of college, when I went to draft and started going to the local store so much that it was just like where I spent a lot of my time outside of class and some of the time when I should have been in class. So it wasn't like one concrete moment, but it was like one summer when the shifts I had at work were horrible. It was like 7 a.m. to like 1 p.m. and then like 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. So I had this like 3-hour break in the middle of the day, and I'd always go to the card store every day. And at the end of that summer, it's like, oh yeah, I'm hooked. I'm not going anywhere.
You knew you weren't looking back. Yeah, for me, it was a little different. It was kind of more career-based, which was like, I had got to this point where I quit my job to start doing more Magic stuff, but I was still like kind of scrapping my way out. And, I had the podcast for quite a while at that point, but I was starting to do coverage a lot more and kind of being like, is this something that I could actually do like full time? And it culminated with me quitting my job and taking a stab at it. And where the point when that turned, when I thought, okay, there's something here that I could actually try to make like a career, like really dedicate myself to this full time or whatever, was when I did the Kickstarter for the show. This is before Patreon existed. And there was really no good options. It was actually just a very awkward solution. But I decided that this was the way that I was going to try to attempt this. And so I spent like 2 or 3 months prepping and putting a bunch of money. I put thousands of dollars into this thing. It had physical rewards and all this crazy designs and all this stuff. And I finally put up the Kickstarter and I went to bed. Basically you hit submit and it doesn't go up right away. Like they have to process some stuff on their back end. It takes a few hours. And I'd finally done this like late at night, and I went to bed and I woke up in the morning and I like got on my phone and I'm like, I want to see like, how did it do? Like, how, are we halfway to the goal? Did we get a start? Are people talking? Did anything happen? And we had like tripled the goal. And it was like overnight, it was 5 hours or something like that. And I was like, oh my God, like this is for real. This
is going to be a thing.
This is going to be a thing. And ever since then, I've tried to, keep us on the best path and all that kind of stuff. But that was the moment where I'm like, I can actually justify as an adult, right? Like putting effort into this and trying to make it into a thing. Fingal says, could we get Luis and Marshall, if possible, to power rank the ways to bling out your deck? Foils, foreign cards, full art, altars, art changing altars, white bordering. He says any combination of the above. This is weird because I know your affinity for old cards, for beta cards and alpha cards and stuff, but like I don't actually know this for you. I don't think I've seen you play with foreign cards. I don't think I've seen you play with very many foils. What do you do that? Do you not do that? What is your deal? So
first of all, any card that could be beta or alpha, make it beta or alpha. That's pretty easy.
Okay.
Second, I think that foreign cards are fine if you like it. That doesn't do it for me, so I don't really prioritize it. And I do like foils. So I play with foils that are of older formats. I have foils from for Legacy, Modern, and Vintage. So I actually played with foils of the Legacy Pro Tour and the Modern Pro Tour.
Right, I remember now. Yeah,
so
you're talking about like the sweet stuff, like foil fetch lands, and
foil fetches and brainstorms and that sort of thing, Thoughtseizes, whatever. But I'm not going to go to the trouble of foiling standard cards. I think that's insane. That just takes way too much effort. So honestly, I think like you should do what makes you happy. For me, the power ranking is beta cards, then foil cards, and then making sure everything matches is the next tier. That's actually the highest tier because I always make sure everything matches. But
why do you do that?
It just bugs me not to. It's not really strategic.
It's just
there's minor strategy where like your opponent duresses you and sees a forest, and then you just draw and play a different picture of forest. Mm-hmm. But for the most part, I think that I just like it.
Yeah, for me, I used to really like foils, and I still do like them quite a bit. But I actually like Japanese cards now.
Oh yeah, they look sweet.
Yeah, I just like, the text just looks awesome. Japanese text is just really sweet. And like my Canadian Highlander deck has a lot more Japanese cards in it than foil at this point. But I'm with Luis on the old stuff. If I can get it in alpha, beta, or any of the first like 4 or 5 sets, I'm in. Paul says, love the show. I have an in-game decision-making question. In situations where your opponent knows some of what's in your hand, how does that influence your decision-making? Do you tend to play the cards out they know over the ones you don't, even if the immediate value of the unknown cards might be higher? In what situation is this a good heuristic and where is it bad? This is a really interesting question, Paul, because what ends up happening is there's actually a lot of Magic that's relatively face up, where the best play is often just to make the most powerful play that you can on board and hidden information be damned. That being said, there's a lot of times where the hidden information matters a lot. But in my heuristic would be to still just, given no other considerations, just play the best thing out of my hand when I can. I don't try in most scenarios if my opponent knows I have a card, it's fine. Like they're going to see it when I play it. And that's where the majority of the value of the card comes, not from the fact that they don't know that it's coming, with a few exceptions. So for me, my opponent playing it, I'll keep it in mind for obvious things, right? Things on board. Like if I play if I play it and it would just die on board or whatever, I won't do that. But any other consideration, if I can just make a more powerful play and not have the information, and give my opponent more information by doing so, I'll usually still just make the more powerful play.
I definitely think that that's the right way to approach that. The one thing that does change a little is if it's a very situational card, like I have a counterspell or a combat trick in my hand, and I have an opportunity to use it, I'll probably use it because it's not going to get much better. Like
that's a great point. Yes.
If your opponent knows you have a 3-mana counter and they just tap out for something, I would just counter it because they're not going to play into the counter in a way that's really good for you. And if they're doing that, then they've just resigned themselves to the fact that you're gonna do that. I would mostly not assume it's like, it's going to be bait to some degree, but it's really hard to have a situational card in your hand, not use it when they know about it.
That's right. Yeah. The only way I would let that thing fly is if I knew I could deal with it on board or with another card in my hand. Joey says, do you ever take into consideration the local metagame when drafting? For example, I regularly draft with the same people. I know player A is more likely to force red because they always seem to do so, etc. Should Joey be changing their draft style around the fact that they kind of have a good idea? And, when you sit down and the player on your right is, oh, that's the red drafter. This guy always drafts red. Yeah, I would actually. Yeah, totally. That's valuable information, right?
Yeah, don't let it bias your draft when you're not sitting with those players. Like, don't learn bad habits. But yeah, totally, you can take that into consideration. That does happen. Like, the Pro Tour is not that big. I'll often sit next to someone who I know enough about their predilections that it does impact me. When I was sitting next to Paul Rietzel, this was a while ago in Shards of Alara, actually. He knew it was kind of the reverse. He knew I just basically forced Esper every draft. In fact, that's what I did. It wasn't necessarily a great plan, but I always did it. Mm-hmm. And he just drafted Jund. I drafted Esper, and it was great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a story that goes back when, was it Z or somebody sat down with a shirt or something?
Yeah, back in Odyssey Torment Judgment, when white was the worst color by a lot, Zvi Mauschwitz, Hall of Famer, wore a shirt that said, "I'm drafting white," or something. I don't really exactly.
Yeah.
It might have been a little bit more subtle than that, but it was really, the idea was to tell people I'm forcing white.
Right.
And he did force white. I don't think he actually did well, though, but I don't remember.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, that's a lot of information to give away. Todd says, hey, Marshall LLC, looking for some thoughts on win rates on Magic Online. I draft once a week in paper, but do sealed and on Moto for GP practice and the general game and general gameplay level ups. When I started on Magic Online, which was Rivals of Ixalan, I had a match win rate of the low 50s, but I've worked up the format win rates of up around 70% with a very clustered distribution of league records. 90% of leagues are either 6-3 or 7-2. A couple of questions arise from this. What's a good win rate on Moto for sealed, and is it different from draft? And do you find your league's records to be clustered or closer to a normal distribution? That's an interesting way to put that. A normal distribution would actually, if it has some element of randomness, would have clusters in it anyway. That the thing that we think is random is usually not.
Oh, people are bad at identifying randomness. When people are told to put together a random sample of flipping coins versus writing one out, it's easy to tell the one that looks more random is the fake one.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, because real randomness does have streaks of 4 heads in a row, and people never write that down in their random.
So above 70% is a very respectable win rate.
Totally
that's quite good on Magic Online. You're gonna end up with, sometimes you have extreme records because in sealeds or drafts, like your good decks are gonna 3-0 and your bad decks are gonna lose quickly. So I don't know how. I guess for sealed, you're still going to have a distribution across all of them, though. I guess since you drop at 2 losses a lot of the time, you're not going to you're going to have more 5-0s and 0-2s than you are like necessarily like 2-3s. Like a 2-3 is pretty hard to get to.
Right. Where if you were forced to play out every round, with your bad deck, that would bring things closer.
Right. Yeah, I mean that's a good win rate for sure.
Yeah. Keep that. If you can get to 70% and stay there, that is
you're doing great.
Douglas says, hi, Marshall and Luis. Love the show and the depth and variety. I've been playing for years now. I'm pretty comfortable with limited, thanks in part to you guys. I'm at the point where now I feel I could squeeze out a few more win percentage and some better plays if I was more comfortable with the more difficult game rules. For example, I have never used the hold priority function on Magic Online. However, I know there have been certain circumstances when I do not want to let my opponent respond to something before I do. Do you have any advice on when to hold priority? Would I play more confidently if I knew the rules better? And when is it time for a limited player to go down the judge path? Ooh, great question, Douglas.
Well,
what do you think, Luis?
The last one, I would not advise going down the judge path unless you want to be a judge. Like, if you want to be a judge, that's a fine place to do. But if you want to get better at playing Magic, that's not a good way to get to that goal. Because a lot of judging is more than just knowing the rules. So unless that is something you're intrinsically interested in, which is totally cool if you are, don't use that as a vehicle for getting better at the rules. You can learn the rules without being a judge. In general, the only time you really want to hold priority is if you want to like play like a copy spell, like Expansion Explosion. If you want to cast Expansion, you need to hold priority, then cast Expansion to copy the spell.
Yeah, League Guild Mages like that too.
Right. Or there's weird things where you want to like put something on the stack and then respond to it with like a removal spell, but that doesn't really come up very often at all.
No, it's extraordinarily rare.
So for the most part, it's just when you're copying stuff. This isn't like a big rules section. In fact, if you didn't know to hold priority, you'd probably be fine just about all the time. So I think getting confident within the rules will help you. That is true. But I for the most part, think you can just pick it up, especially if you play online.
Yeah. One thing that's helped me a lot over the years with the rule stuff is I'll ask judges, right? There's a judge chat you can do, or if you happen to know a judge, or you can go on Twitter and ask. And the thing is they'll tell you the answer, but what I'll usually just do is just say why. I'll just ask them why, just to explain to me a little bit further about why a rule does this. And, then you start getting into the things where they say, oh, well, that's a reflexive trigger, or that's an intervening if. And now you can start to see these patterns of like, oh, right, I know that these type of triggers check when they trigger and then check when they resolve, or they won't trigger at all if the thing's not met. And you'll start to see those patterns. You learn the way, and I'm sure that Douglas knows these, but like, it was a big deal for me when I was learning to understand on an activated ability that there's a colon, right? And everything before it is the cost and everything after it is the effect. That helped me a lot because it lets me break that down kind of like a math problem on my own, where I can go, okay, where's the colon? It's right here, everything over here. So tapping the creature is part of the cost. It's not going to happen as a result of it. Like, for example, our mythic rare that we opened, the Underrealm Lich, right? It says pay for life, colon. So all I do is pay for life. I pay that, and then everything after that happens. It gets indestructible until end of turn, tap it, right? And now, since I know that, I can look at that kind of equation and go, okay, do this, get this, and that's how it's going to work. And you'll start seeing those patterns over and over. But it helped me to ask the judges why, even on simple questions, because then they would say, oh, well, this is a, whatever trigger, and this is how this works. It is really useful, by the way, to have that. The other thing that we talk about on the show quite a bit, I'm sure we'll touch on again in the future as well, is really understanding the handshakes in combat, right? When you say go to combat or go to attackers, or, after you've declared attackers, ordering all these things and how they happen in order and who gets to do what when can be really, really powerful stuff for like intermediate to good Magic player to really understand. All right, we'll do a couple more of these questions and then we're going to have to cut it short, but I'm going to grab the rest of these and try to figure out something because, boy, there's a million of them. Starbright says, I've heard the original Zendikar was probably the fastest limited format ever. How fast was it? What did the decks look like in the format? what was the slowest format for limited by contrast. From my time playing limited, I think Zendikar is probably the fastest. The thing that marked it really was that basically every color had a creature in it that cost 2 mana, had at least 2 power, and effectively couldn't be blocked at common. They all had this. There was a 2/1 in black that had like landfall, it gets menace or fear or whatever until end of turn. Intimidate. I think you got intimidate until end of turn.
Yeah, Surikar Marauder.
Right. There's a 2/1 basically with flying, when it's attacking.
There's just a million GOP, 1 and 2 drops. And because of landfall, the way the landfall cards were, they were all just obscenely large, like Steplings and GOP.
On your turn.
Yeah. So,
yeah.
Well, that's so like so fast as no one could ever block.
Exactly. Right. Because like they're big on my turn when I want to be attacking, and your creatures are small on your turn when they want to be blocking. So the result is I don't block. And then on my turn, I play a land and my creatures are, hey, look, we're racing. And this just seemed to happen all the time. Slowest format? Like of the normal sets, I think M14 was the slowest I ever played.
That's exactly the one I was gonna call out.
Yeah.
I mean, the tiebreaker actually is triple Mercadian Masks was absurdly slow, but that's barely a real format. The cards are just not designed basically like with any sort of modern design principles in mind. But yeah, M14, that was a format where you could legitimately win off Elixir of Immortality with like opportunity and divination and just keep drawing your deck over and over again.
Yeah, that was a good. By the way, I got so savaged on Mercadian Masks once. It was so brutal. It was actually funny. So there was a Seattle draft league. Everybody bought in and we had this
this thing.
Draft league.
I never did it, but I remember hearing about it.
Yeah, it was great. And I had a team. It was me, John Laux, he was my co-host at the time, and Zamebeg. And the thing was, it was kind of ostensibly a cube league. Like somebody would bring a cube, you'd meet up at a bar or a game shop, and then you'd battle, and then you'd report back to the commissioner to see who won. And then, there was prizes at the end and stuff. But the thing is, you technically, the home team or whatever could technically pick whatever format they wanted. But most people were like, well, let's just do cube because you don't have to go track down packs and all that stuff. Well, we played against the old school guys, Noah Weil and company, and they're like, all right, boys, we're playing Mercadian Masks Limited. Of course, I'm sitting there. I'm a baby. I have no idea what any of these cards do. One of them played one of those what's the 2/4 that you have to target, the flag something?
Oh, yeah. This is that was Invasion, yeah.
Oh, that was an invasion. So what was the card I was thinking of? I don't know. There was some annoying card that forced me to do something that I didn't, and I just kept forgetting about it and not understanding how it worked. But anyway, I ended up winning my match, but we lost our match. And
Masks was I won almost half my matches on Magic Online when it was a flashback draft by timing my opponent out.
Oh, God. It was like, I remember 2/4s just facing off against each other. Yeah, that was not fun. Peter says, Marshall and Luis, do confess that last week's power ranking results completely broke with LR mentality. Oh, okay. But this is a question I mentioned before. Buying bottled water in plastic bottles with a few drops of lemon juice seems like such poor value to me, both economically and environmentally. Assuming that tap water quality in the US is as high as it is over here in Europe, you really need to make a stretch why putting some lemon slices or squeezing a lemon into tap water is not strictly better than buying Spindrift in the store. You told us so often you apply LR philosophy not only to Magic, but in life as well. How do you explain this? And then he put a winky face. All right, Peter. So here's the thing. First off, Spindrift is carbonated, right? It's not the same thing as just putting water, lemon in water. It's fizzy. And so that's not the same. Also, by the way, I got to defend us here, Luis. I bought one of those, what is that thing called? SodaStream?
Yeah.
I have a SodaStream. I used to buy bottled seltzer water for years, like 15 years. Like I was way ahead of this trend or whatever, because I don't really like pop that much anyway. So I was drinking this stuff since I was a kid. And I used to buy the bottles of it and then go recycle the cans or the bottles or whatever forever. And then my mom got me this, because she knows how much of this stuff I drink. She got me one of those SodaStreams. So I do exactly what Peter said. So boom, LR mentality applied to real life.
Yeah, I think that
I still want to try Spindrift.
I should get a SodaStream, but the one difference is it is carbonated. It's not just tap water. So
right, yeah.
That does matter.
So sit down, Peter. Back of the class, sit down. All right, last question here. This one comes Also from Peter. Peter says, hi guys, I started to notice that I've been making quicker decisions in Magic, and this has actually been detrimental for me in lots of cases. For example, I fail to analyze certain board states instead of taking time to actually see what could happen. Here's one good example. In a recent draft, I was playing Is It Aggro against Boros. I had Lethal on board with Cosmotronic Wave, played it, and died because I had 1 life and my opponent had True Fire Captain. I ended up 1-2 in the match. Are there any drills that you run to get rid of certain bad habits, such as failing to realize triggers that can happen or playing too fast? One that I learned actually from the guy I just mentioned, Noah Weil, that can help with this type of thing is to have a routine built into your play patterns. What he would do is he would draw his card every turn and just look at the board before looking at it. Just for a second. It wasn't a 30-second ordeal. It was just a deep breath and okay, what am I doing? Am I ahead? Am I behind? What are the things, okay, they have a True Fire Captain. I got to remember that. Okay, boom, look at my card. Okay, now start to proceed with the turn again. It's just taking a beat to yourself to just say, I'm going to take a minute, look at the board, take a breath, and then proceed on. And that can really help with just a few of these things where you can get a little too ahead of yourself and then have an oversight like this where you're like, oh crap, I just killed myself. Or, the games where you're just like, I know I could have won, or I literally could have won, right? Those are the ones that you really want to avoid if you find yourself playing too quickly. And I think that just taking that minute to survey the board each turn, especially on key turns, just to do a little mental checkbox is well worth your time. Now, you do have to incorporate that into a way that you're playing quickly enough. You can't start from scratch every turn, but you can definitely take just a minute to kind of reset yourself each time. I think that's definitely useful for if you find yourself playing too quickly, especially if you get caught up with an opponent that plays quickly. You play faster than almost anybody, Luis, so you're probably on the other end of this. But for normal human beings, when your opponent's playing really quickly, like I play really fast for the first few turns of the game because there's not that much to process. And I'll see my opponents sometimes try to keep up and they'll make mistakes, and it's just like, you don't have to play the speed I'm playing necessarily.
Yeah, I think that the tip to look at the board before drawing or before looking at the card you just drew is a cool one. It's really hard to know exactly how you're supposed to basically make the right plays, but most people have the problem playing too slow. So it's interesting to see if you're playing too fast, just take a second to reevaluate basically, what's going on the board, what important things could be happening, I think is a pretty good way. The other thing is if you are playing so fast that you have extra time, yeah, you can take a second to just double check your plan. Am I missing something? But most people have the opposite problem. So right. This is one that I think is a little easier to solve.
I think so too. Yeah. You just have to work something into your routine. That's the key. Because we can tell you, well, you should just take more time. But you probably knew that, Peter, right? So you have to find a way to kind of work it into your routine of a certain point in the game or certain situations where you feel, hey, I'm going to win this game. I'm going to take a minute here to make sure that I've got it all lined up. And that's that. Okay. Well, we didn't get to all the questions. In fact, we've got quite a few left, but hopefully I'll find some time or a way to get these. Otherwise, they'll have to wait for the next question and answer show where I'll put up a new post and you can do them. If we don't get to them, you also feel free to add them to the next Patreon question of the week show as well. And we'll do our best to get to them there. That, of course, is going to do it, though, for this week on Limited Resources. Thank you so much to all of our patrons for supporting the show and also for these awesome questions that they've submitted to us. And, of course, we want to thank channelfireball.com for sponsoring the show. I mentioned it before, and so did one of our hashtag branding listeners. You can sell your cards back to CFB. You can go on Channel Fireball, and you can set it up so that you either trade in the cards or you can get cash for them. If you trade them in, you're going to get a 30% trade-in bonus, which is just like, dude, that's a lot. Like, you can take a random pile of rares, and you're halfway to a box of Guilds of Ravnica before you know it with that trade-in bonus. And if you wait too long on those draft rares, they will lose their value when they eventually rotate, and you're going to be really kicking yourself that random rare that was worth $10, is now worth 50 cents and nobody wants to buy it at all. That you got to strike while the iron's hot with those standard rotating cards. So make sure you get on Channel Fireball and check out that part of the site so that you can get your 30% trade-in bonus if you're into it. On social media, I am Marshall_LR, and Luis is LSV. That's going to do it for this one. Luis, I guess we're going to record. I don't know. I'm going to be in Atlanta next week until you get there, but maybe we can. I'll be there in the early part of the week, so it may be a normal show, or it may be a Luis is laying on the bed show. We'll figure it out when we get there. That's going to do it for this one. We'll see you next week.
So it's kind of funny that a couple questions touched on this, but I actually did over the course of streaming yesterday realize that my top 5 draft formats actually have to be updated. And part of that is the release of Dominaria. Spoiler, that's one of them. Mm-hmm. And part of that is I actually realized that Ravnica and Invasion Block both actually weren't as good as I remembered. So that prompted me to reevaluate. So at number 5, I have Mirrodin Darksteel. I thought that this format, though fairly fast, was a good combination of synergy and really weird pick orders. Like the fact that the affinity for artifacts mechanic made you take artifact lands and cheap artifacts really high was kind of cool. Like it just felt so different than every other draft format that I really, really liked it.
Is Molder Slug in either of those sets?
Yes, it is. Molder Slugs and Mirrodin.
I will never forgive you for that. Go on.
Oh, wait. What happened?
When we were on the Magic Cruise.
I did
that was my first time playing that format, and you're like, Molder Slug. I'm like, what does that do? And you just started laughing.
Oh, I remember that now, yes.
Yeah.
I was wondering why we drafted that format, but yes, on the Magic Cruise, that makes sense.
Yeah, we just had like random packs. Anyway, carry on.
For number 4, I do have Dominaria. That I think that it just has such a rich, rich vein of different decks that you can draft. It's got a lot of really cool stuff going on. The flavor's good. The gameplay is really good. So really big fan of Dominaria.
Wow. Congratulations, Dominaria.
Yeah, that is definitely good. For number 3, I have Rise of the Eldrazi. I think Rise is excellent. It is really slow. It's one of the slowest formats ever, but despite that, it has enough really cool decks going on that I think it just does some really cool stuff. And a big part of it is it also felt very different. You could play 12 drops in your deck. 8 drops were just decent early picks. Yeah. It was just viable to do all these things.
They made it work. They made that happen. That's a hard thing to do and come away with a format you still actually like.
Right. Yeah. And it had legs. Like a lot of formats look like they're going to be fun the first couple drafts and then end up being just okay. The Rise, despite being so weird, it wasn't just novelty. It was actually really fun indeed.
What doesn't have legs?
What doesn't have legs?
Molder Slug.
Yes, Molder Slug, I suppose, does not have legs. Yeah, that was pretty good. For number 2, I have Cons. We were talking about it earlier, and I just remember doing the flashback drafts just like a month or 2 ago, and oh man, Cons was so good. So good. The fact that you could draft 2-color aggro, 3 to 5-color control, 5-color morphs, each different clan was its own experience. Had really fun mechanics, had cool morphs. Yeah, Cons was awesome. I think that Cons was really, really cool. Plus the tap lands that gained a life were really powerful.
Yeah, they're really good. And it had good build arounds. God, I love that one.
Yeah, Cons was excellent. Number 1, I drafted it yesterday. It's still, I think, the best draft format of all time. Can you guess?
Triple Innistrad, baby.
Damn, there we go. Triple Innistrad it was just a home run everywhere. Tons of build arounds, tons of weird play patterns. Also, if you were new to the format or new to draft, you could just draft a 2-color deck of any combination. It was just plausible.
Yep.
Humans was very straightforward. And then the flavor is just 10 out of 10. The flavor is just so good. You had village cannibals. You had just all the vampires and zombies. You just had all this really cool stuff like that. Just
werewolves,
really resonated. Oh, yeah,
God, I love that.
So I think Innistrad was awesome. Burning Vengeance is one of my favorite cards ever. Spider Spawning was very fun too. Had the weird runic repetition memories journey loop.
Oh yeah,
there was just all this nonsense going on, and you could still draft blue white spirits and red black vampires and just beat your opponent down. Green white travel prep was awesome. I don't know, just everything about it. It was just, I think, just a 10 out of 10. So I still give Triple Innistrad the crown, and I'm curious when the next time these will be updated. It would be pretty nice if we got to update them soon, because that just means another great set has entered the pan.
Yeah, it's going to be hard. Nice set. Nice rundown, though. Man, that is a blockbuster lineup.